Hi there, boys and girls. Today for story time, we're going to read Johnny Appleseed, a tall tale retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. And today is Johnny Appleseed's birthday, September 26th. What better way to have story time? John Chapman, who later became known as Johnny Appleseed, was born on September 26th in 1774. When the apples on the trees surrounding his home in Leominster, Massachusetts, were as red as the autumn leaves. John's first years were hard. His father left the family to fight in the Revolutionary War, and his mother and his baby brother both died before his second birthday. By the time John turned 6, his father had remarried and settled in Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and within a decade their little house was overflowing with 10 more children. Nearby was an apple orchard, and like most early American families, the Chapmans picked their apples in the fall and stored them in the cellar for winter eating. They used them to make sauces, cider, vinegar, and apple butter. John loved to watch the spring blossoms slowly turn into glowing fruit of autumn. Watching the apples grow inspired in John a love of all of nature. He often escaped from his boisterous household to the tranquil woods, and the animals sensed his gentleness and trusted him. As soon as John was old enough to leave home, he set out to explore the vast wilderness to the west. When he reached the Allegheny Mountains, he cleared a plot of land and planted a small orchard with a pouch of apple seeds that he carried with him. John walked hundreds of miles through the Pennsylvania forest, living like the Indians he befriended on the trail. As he traveled, he cleared the land for many more orchards, and he was sure the pioneer families would be arriving before long, and he looked forward to supplying them with apple trees. When a storm struck, he found shelter in a hollow log or built a lean-to. On clear nights, he stretched out under the stars. Over the next few years, John continued to visit and care for his new orchards. The winters slowed him down, but he survived happily on a diet of butternuts. Nuts and berries he found in the forest. One early spring, he met a band of men who boasted they could lick their weight in wildcats. They were amazed to hear that John wouldn't hurt an animal, and he had no use for a gun. They challenged John to compete at wrestling, the favorite frontier sport. He suggested a more practical contest, a tree-chopping match. The woodsman eagerly agreed. It was a contest, a challenge, to see who could chop the most trees. Oh my goodness. Look at all that tree chopping. When the sawdust settled, there was no question about who had come out on top, and John was pleased that the land for his largest orchard had been so quickly cleared. He thanked the exhausted woodsmen for their help, and he began planting. He tricked them into chopping down a bunch of trees for him. He made it into a contest. During the next few years, John continued to move westward. Can't talk today. Whenever he ran out of apple seeds, he hiked to the eastern cider presses to replenish his supply, and before long, John's plantings were spread all across the state of Ohio. Meanwhile, pioneer families were arriving in search of home sites and farmland. John had located his orchards on the routes he thought they'd be traveling, and as he had hoped, the settlers were eager to buy his young trees. People moving to find a home of their own. John went out of his way to lend a helping hand to his new neighbors. Often he would give his trees away for free. People affectionately started calling him Johnny Appleseed, and he began using that name. He's helping other people build their houses. He particularly enjoyed entertaining children with tales of his wilderness adventures and the stories from the Bible. In 1812, the British incited the Indians to join them in another war against the Americans. The settlers feared that Ohio would be invaded from Lake Erie. It grieved Johnny that his friends were fighting each other, but when he saw smoke of burning cabins, he ran through the night, shouting a warning at every door. After the war, people urged Johnny to build a house and settle down, but he replied that he lived like a king in his wilderness home, and he returned to the forest that he loved. During his long absences, folks enjoyed sharing their own recollections of Johnny. They retold his stories, and sometimes they even exaggerated them a bit. Tale of him giving an apple bigger than his head. Think that's a real story? Maybe. Some recalled Johnny sleeping in a treetop hammock and chatting with the birds. Do you think that's true? Maybe. Others remembered that a rattlesnake had once attacked his foot. Fortunately, Johnny's feet were as tough as elephant hide, so the snake's fangs didn't penetrate. His feet were so tough that the snake couldn't get him. It was said that Johnny had once tended a wounded wolf and kept him for a pet. One odd hunter swore he had seen Johnny frolicking with a bear family. The stories outdid each other, with each tall tale about his feats of survival in the untamed wilderness. Each story got more and more crazy. Like the time when lightning almost struck Johnny, or he was carried away by a big giant eagle, or a troll trying to get his apples, a mountain lion attacking him, running across a frozen river, almost going down a waterfall, and there getting swallowed up by a giant fish. Do you think those were true stories? Or are they just pretend stories? As the years passed, Ohio became too crowded for Johnny. He moved to the wilds of Indiana, where he continued to clear land for his orchards. When the settlers began arriving, Johnny recognized some of them were children who had listened to his stories. Now they had children of their own. They were grown up. It made Johnny's old heart glad when they welcomed him as a beloved friend and asked to hear his tales again. Johnny's much older now, too. When Johnny passed 70, it became more difficult for him to keep up with his work. Then, in March of 1845, while trudging through a snowstorm near Fort Wayne, Indiana, he became ill for the first time in his life. Johnny asked to seek shelter in a settler's cabin, but a few days later, he died there. Curiously, though, Johnny's stories continued to move westward without him. Folks maintained that they had seen him in Illinois, and that he had greeted them in Missouri and in Arkansas. Some say they saw him in Texas and Oklahoma. Others were certain that he had planted trees on the slopes of the Rocky Mountains and in California's distant valleys. Even today, people still claim that they've seen Johnny Appleseed. Do you think he's still out there, living in the woods with the animals, planting apple trees? Maybe. The end. Johnny Appleseed. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Go eat an apple for Johnny Appleseed. Take care. Bye-bye.